Building in a Small Town, where we're talking to entrepreneurs, community leaders, policymakers, and more to find out how they're building things in small towns. I'm your host, Shelby Smith. All right, hello, and welcome back to the Building in a Small Town podcast. Today, I am joined by Ross Naylor of Renomads, technically 1/3 of Renomads, right?
I guess half.
Half, okay.
Yeah, but we got 12 guys on the team, so maybe just a small fraction of that.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that. That's to be continued. So thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So tell me a little bit. I know some of your background because you played football with my husband at Wartburg, but tell me a little bit about how life before Renomads, and then we'll get to how Renomads evolved and all of that. So where'd you grow up? I think you are a Central Iowa native. So where'd you grow up and all that?
So I currently live in Cambridge, which is just 5 miles north of Ankeny, which is where I grew up. Spent my childhood there, jumped around a few different schools, homeschooled a little bit.
You were homeschooled?
I was, yeah, for
only
1 year.
Oh,
but
was it all of you or just?
No, just me. It was very private, just me and Mom.
You ruined it for the rest of them.
Well, they each had their year too. Yeah, we all got one.
All at the same age?
5th grade, I think. Yeah, we each got 5th grade with Mom.
What was the idea with that?
I think she just wanted to try, but didn't want to take them all at once.
Yeah, I don't blame her.
Yeah.
I mean, the three of you, that would have been
a lot.
That would have been a handful.
And you've already figured out what 5th grade looks like on the first one. So I was the guinea pig. Then I think it's just it was duplicated a couple of years.
Easy past that, yeah. So I suppose we should, for context for people, you're one of 3 brothers.
Yes.
Like you have 2 younger brothers.
Which is why you got your 3rd, I think, at the start.
Yeah, and that was going to be part of my question. I didn't know if it was just you and Seth, or if it was you, Seth, and Heath, or you guys we'll talk about it later. But anyways, context of the story, you have 3 brothers, and I couldn't imagine your poor mother having to juggle all 3 of you at the same time homeschooling, or if she was, then I could see why it only lasted for a year. Let's put it that way. So, all right. So you were homeschooled for a year, and then.
I went to Ankeny High School, finished up school there. I never liked school. It was never really my thing. Yeah. I did fine in school, but I was very bored, and I've got a whole opinion on what school systems should look like versus the institutionalized schooling that we all go through today. But after that, during school, I worked in the construction industry, specifically as a framing carpenter, and we were standing frames for new houses. I started doing that when I was 15.
And was that,
I got my first job when I was 12. But
did you get into the construction side because you had like family friends? Like, how did that job come about? Or you were just like, I wanted to work in construction?
I think I always liked creating things that other people used. Houses are used more than, once you're in the house, you can do a bunch of different things. Mm-hmm. When being that I did have brothers, when I was younger, a lot of kids play and do stuff like that. I would build forts for my brothers to play in. I would put their toys together, but I didn't really want to ever play with the toys. I just wanted to put things together. So, my first construction project, neither one of my parents were in the construction industry. There was no prior knowledge there. They were both ag science majors and worked with hogs. We lived in town. There was basically no tools at our house. I think there was a tape measure and a hammer around, but
so if anything broke or anything needed to be built, they were calling somebody, essentially. It wasn't like
it wasn't like it was something that was
Bob wasn't super handy growing up, is what you're telling me.
Inherent to the family. My grandpa was a carpenter, which was my dad's dad, but he was really a farmer that became a carpenter because the government decided to put a lake over their farm and kick them out. So,
And where was their farm?
I was in Indiana.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So mom's from upstate New York, dad's from Indiana. They moved to Iowa 10 days before I was born, and then that's where we're at now in the story, I guess.
Did they pick Iowa because they were both worked with hogs, and we are the leading producer, or how did that happen?
There was a business called Swine Genetics International that was on the north end of Cambridge that they worked in genetics of hogs, and that's selling byproduct of the animals for reproductive use.
Semen. You can
Yes.
say semen. It's
Okay.
fine.
Well, I just wanted to make sure it was...
You can also curse, just so you know.
Okay.
This is a free-flowing podcast, but yes.
Well, they sold lots and lots of semen.
Yeah.
And both of them worked at that business, and were actually partial owners in the business for quite a few years, but neither one of them worked there anymore.
I wonder if, or I'll have to ask your dad next time I see him. I wonder if he knows the Kearns, Carl Kearns. They're in southwest Iowa, and they were very involved in...
I wonder if he would, because
I bet he
feel
would.
like I've heard that name before.
Well, and I got to imagine that the boar semen market cannot be that big of a world. And I do know that the Kearns, like, they're out of southwest Iowa. The son, who's like our age, is now a professor of animal science at Iowa State. But the dad, they're still in like really specialty genetics, really high end pork that they try to market then to. They're growing, feeding hogs out and doing all that. But I'm gonna have to ask him next time, because if that's the world they were in, it can't be that big. Everybody knows everybody. But who knows?
My dad worked a lot in international markets. They'd have people come over from China, Japan, Korea quite often for our genetic pools here in the United States to pull it back to their countries. I think the industry has changed a lot, and that's why my dad's... he doesn't even want to be involved anymore.
Yeah.
The phenotype that they were trying to drive the industry toward was geared toward meat quality and meat health, and they were trying to design the genetics of the animal to create as little stress as possible through daily life. Well, now they've got, instead of having longer legs and long, bodies and good muscular development, things like that, they've got these little short legs
with big old bellies, and they can barely walk.
And aesthetically, it's a different looking pig, but functionally, it completely got away from the direction that they were trying to, at the time, what they thought was important. So when that happened, that transition changed in the industry. My dad was no longer interested really in being a part of it, because he had worked his whole life taking it from that to what it was going to be, and then they just brought it right back again. That's where they're at now. But
fair. Interesting. Okay. So your parents get here 10 days before you're born, making you officially an Iowa native. And then, like I said, you played football in college with my husband. So while you're doing the construction thing and everything, you were obviously involved in sports as well.
I was.
Okay. How'd that go?
I like team. So
you were not like individual. You didn't wrestle. You didn't.
I did. Okay. I did wrestle. I was good, but I refused to wrestle varsity because I like team. So I would go, and I was the practice dummy for everybody else. But
what?
I could beat all those guys during practice. I could have had varsity spot or whatever, but I was not interested in that sort of competition. It would make me sick to go and sit there all day long for 6 minutes. Too much anxiety, I think. I don't know. I liked working as a team, so I did all the wrestling practices, did well. My coaches were always really upset with me that I refused to wrestle anybody off for the starting spot, but I would say at least I'm here helping them. You know?
Making them better.
Yeah, they're getting better. I did track too. I liked football because I should have played soccer. Soccer was really the sport that I liked.
Yeah.
I would do that in the summers, 3-on-3.
And why didn't you play soccer? You just didn't, because you wanted to work in the summer, or?
Politics and Ankeny soccer program.
I could see that.
Yeah. So I was a big brute of a football player, and even though I would have done just fine, I even got recruited off of 3-on-3 tournaments to go to some colleges and stuff like that. And I wasn't even, they'd be like, can we come watch you play it during season time? I was like, I don't play during the season. This is just for fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just for something to do kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay.
And then I decided to, parents really wanted us to go to college. I really liked working with my hands. I was tired of school. I didn't want to do more school. But my parents were both, my dad especially was the first person in his family to go to college. For that generation, if you had a college degree, there was a lot of doors that would open up for you. I think the environment today is quite different. I think an electrician probably has a lot more opportunities than what a communications major might have coming out of college. But
yeah, I suppose we should caveat that though with as long as you are pairing it with proper work ethic.
Yes.
You know, it goes without saying, but
initial opportunities out the door are extremely different and it doesn't matter if you have you were top of the class and have all the work ethic in the world, you're still going to get a very marginal starting salary being a college graduate, and you can make over $100,000 a year with a journeyman's license as an electrician.
Yeah.
Right out. And you got paid the whole time instead of paying for school. So
right.
To elaborate further on that, the current environment for electricians is aged. The majority of electricians out there are over 45. A lot of them are over 50. They're going to be retiring in the next so many years, and there's not going to be enough people. So the rates are only going to continue to go up for those people. There's a lot of communications majors that come out each year.
Right. That's very true. But okay, so then when you came out of high school, your parents had already set you on the path of we want you to go to college. So then
That's when I met Willie.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Man, we wouldn't even be sitting here without Willie.
I took more snaps against your husband than anybody else in probably my life. So
yeah.
We practiced against each other every day for 4 years, and I've got nerve damage now in
because of it.
And I'm sure he's beat up a little bit still because of me too.
I imagine. I think he's taken a few more hits to the head than I would like him to have taken, but it is what it is.
Have you ever heard of BPC 157?
Yes.
I've been considering doing that.
Yeah, I think that's although I think it just got banned and or made illegal, harder to get.
Gotta go to Europe.
That's fine. He's getting his passport.
I know someone that's going soon.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's getting his passport. But okay, so you end up why Wartburg? Were you getting recruited by multiple people at that point? What position did you play?
So Willie was a center and I was a nose guard.
Okay. I hate football for the record, so.
Well, we're the big guys in the middle.
I know at least that part. Did you play that in high school?
Yes.
Okay.
I played in high school. I played the whole game. I never came off the field. I played all the special teams, played offense, played defense. In college, I was getting recruited as a running back for some schools and as a defensive lineman for other schools. Mm-hmm. I chose Wartburg because, I chose to play football because I didn't want to go to college to begin with, but these people wanted me at their college, which made me feel comfortable. If I was going to go, I wanted to go somewhere where somebody wanted me, where I could be used and be useful. So I evaluated about 4 different central Iowa D1 schools. They were interested in me until they saw me. I had I have quite a few different accolades from high school that made me look very appealing for anyone in the football field. But once they actually showed up and seen who I was and my size and stuff like that, all the big schools backed out. So I ended up looking at the Iowa Conference. Half of them wanted me as a running back. The other half wanted me as a defensive lineman. The other half didn't really know where they wanted me. They just wanted me to come. Mm-hmm. I chose Wartburg because, to be honest, I had a really good time on my
recruiting visit.
And
well done.
And I connected well with the guys. Mm-hmm. I thought, if I'm going to go somewhere, I can do almost any job with people that I like. I could do the best job with somebody that I completely dislike being around, and it's going to ruin the whole experience. So I like the guys at Wartburg. I decided to go to Wartburg and do that. Another little thing that I did end up pursuing was Wartburg was the only Division III school that had an engineering program in Iowa.
Interesting.
So they're the only one that it's not an accredited engineering program. It's engineering science. It worked really well for guys that wanted to do civil, structural type of engineering. Typically, after they finished there, they would go to Iowa State or another engineering school. Most of them had to take 1 or 2 more classes at that college, specifically for whatever master degree they were trying to acquire before they'd let them enter the master's program. But it's a liberal arts school,
right?
So it was a liberal engineering program, and that's what I ended up studying, or one of my majors.
What was the other major?
Business administration.
Shocking. I would have never guessed.
Yeah. And then I think I had a minor in international communications.
Okay. You just picked them all up. I mean, I suppose if you're taking the classes and you're strategic about it, you can pick up the majors and the minors pretty quick.
I'm paying for it either way. I might as well get as much as I can get out of it. So
yeah.
I did the football and started for 4 years at Wartburg. Was a captain last year, and then did both majors and that minor and got it all done in 4 years.
Yeah. And so overall, would you say you had a pretty positive experience at Wartburg then? Enjoyed it? Would do it again?
I would never go back to school ever again.
Well, okay, fair.
So,
but the football portion, you basically went to school to play football.
And if I'm being completely honest, I don't like football. I haven't hardly watched any games. I think this Super Bowl was the first Super Bowl I'd watched since I was in Bolivia last.
Yeah.
And I was with a teammate, and he wanted to watch the Super Bowl because we were riding motorcycles around down there. That's a funny story how we found a TV that day, but I like team.
Yeah.
That's why I was there.
Yeah.
I liked all of us pulling in the same direction for something.
Mm-hmm.
Even my business today that I own, there are a lot of other opportunities for me that would be much more beneficial for me as a person, but I would be so less fulfilled in the course of my life if I was to just do those things that would be most beneficial for me. So I have a team of guys, and sometimes everything goes really well for our team and sometimes it doesn't, but we're all working and pulling in the same direction, and that's what I like. So
yeah. Interesting. Mm-hmm. Okay. I also kind of feel the same way about basketball. Even though I played it in college and I was good at it, it was just, I don't love it. It's not something that I like watch often. Mm-hmm. Whereas I had teammates that they loved basketball. They're still involved. They still coach. They do all that. That sounds like my nightmare. But my husband loves football. Loves it. He loves it, which is great. I don't, but he can go watch it and do whatever he wants with it. So it's interesting that you are the same way in that. Okay, so you graduate from Wartburg in 2013. Then what do you do?
I did a little bit of, well, if I can preface that with some senior level last semester classes that I took. There were three classes in particular that as I got to the end of, I never wanted to be in school, but then obviously towards the end of your college career, you have to start thinking about, okay, what am I going to do now? Especially when you've got hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially in student loans. Like you got to figure something out fast.
Well, and that's one thing to note for people who are not familiar with Wartburg. Wartburg is a private college. Division III, you don't get any scholarship for athletics. And Wartburg is
$56,000 a year.
Incredibly expensive. Like incredibly expensive as far as schools go. I will tell you that my other half, knowing what he knows now and where he's at now, would have chosen a different path, shall we say, just purely on that alone of how expensive it was. But he just wanted to play football coming out of high school and didn't know any better. So, okay, so you're senior year, starting to think about, what am I going to do next? You start to get in some classes you kind of like, or?
Well, I had some classes that made me question some things. I had three classes in particular. One was my business senior seminar class, which was simply dialogue based, very much like our current interview, except there was 20 people in the room, and pretty much the only requirement for the class was to write a 30-page single-spaced essay. And that was the end of the class.
Essay about?
It could be anything you want it to be. It just needed to be an in-depth research paper that used a certain form and argued a point of some sort.
And that class cost you?
Oh, I don't know.
But you know what I mean,
$56,000 divided by 8 classes.
Yeah.
Over the course, or maybe it's 6 a semester. Feel like it's 4 classes a semester, but I can't really remember.
That would drive me nuts if that was something that I was paying for to get credit to graduate. But anyway, sorry, continue. Didn't mean to derail that.
I had some academic scholarships and things like that helped out with my costs going into it. But yeah, that's a lot for people to bite off. Anyway, I had that class, which I really actually enjoyed, but it gave me the opportunity to talk with a bunch of my peers and see where they were at in their lives and what their plans were and the things that were important to them as people. And I felt like what was important to me was far different from everybody else in the room, knowing that I'm about to enter a world of people that have that sort of mindset kind of made me pull back a little bit.
What do you mean? What was it that really put you off?
It's the team thing. I feel like we're all in this together, and nobody, especially in the United States, you get outside the United States, things are different. In the United States, it's, we live in neighborhoods with a bunch of houses, and everybody has their own thing going on, and they some people are different, they might know their neighbors, but I run into a lot of people that have no idea who they've been living next to for the last 10 years. If somebody needs help, you should hire somebody to help you, not just call your friends and family. Let's put our parents in nursing homes instead of bringing them into the house and educating the younger. There's just so much about our culture that is competition based,
it's isolating,
individualized, is positioning over the other. I don't like any of that, but it's where I live. So taking that class and being able to talk about some of those things, expressing my opinion, then having other people tell me theirs, made me step back a little bit and kind of reconsider where I was.
Did it more solidify your values for you, hearing everybody else? You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes when you are met with an opposition that way, yes, it makes you step back. But sometimes in that stepping back, it more solidifies. Or did you reconsider and be like, maybe I need to take a look at...
I was never going to change I thought I was right. I thought everybody else was wrong.
Shocking.
So don't know that it solidified it any more than what I did, but it might have helped me articulate better the things that I was feeling. But it didn't like become stronger for me. As time went on, I feel like I have had to learn to just accept, because I wanted to change things. I thought I could change things. I thought people might listen. I thought people wanted to explore and expand their world and perspective, but I've come to find out that if you're happy and content, then why look around? And that's just how it is.
I say everybody lives their life different, and that takes all kinds.
And there's no right or wrong way to do it.
Sure.
And who am I to tell anyone how to do anything? I only get to do that for my employees.
Sometimes.
So there was that class, which I could tell you about the paper that I got into that kind of brought me. Yeah, my paper was after talking with everybody. A lot of people wrote their papers about baseball statistics or just kind of, I don't know. I decided to explore the economic structures, and if economic structures actually have in essence, if they have some sort of morality that they push behind that then the culture, the people that are involved in that economic structure, does that actually change the way they think or not?
So we're talking capitalism versus communism versus that kind of thing?
Yeah,
or...
that kind of thing, those type of, and I was curious to know if our consumer culture was really what was driving some of these values that I was in conflict with. I didn't really get anywhere. I just talked myself in loops for 30 pages, and that was it. But,
sounds like a typical economist anyway, so it's fine.
Yeah. So then the other thing that the other two classes, which had a little less impact, but was my senior level finance class, and which I had just never done because my schedule was screwed up, my entry level engineering economics class. I was in a class full of business majors taking the hardest class of their career.
Finance. Okay.
That's the way it seemed to me.
I know. Fair enough. Sorry.
They literally had calculators that had the equations
built in. Yeah, like interest, compound interest, and things like that.
And you would, for the work portions of the test, you would draw the squares of the calculator and put your buttons that you hit. And then here's with the seniors, college seniors. Then I'm in my engineering economic class. That's a bunch of college freshmen who've never hardly taken a college class. And we cover in the first 2 weeks in that engineering economic class what we cover the whole semester of finance.
Yeah.
And I start in our English or our engineering class, we're learning what the actual equations are.
As you should. That is terrifying to me that a finance class you're not actually learning.
Well, here's what's even more terrifying. I am acing all my tests in finance, and I'm not going to class anymore because why would I? I'm taking the same class twice, and one's
much more comprehensive.
Yes. And so I'm going and I'm taking these tests, and I get one of my tests back. Every question, I get 100% on the test. Every answer is right, but I get deducted 30% on the test, so I end up with a D because I don't show my work. And it's not that I didn't show my work, it's that I didn't draw the buttons of the calculator, and I actually did the mathematics. So I brought it up to the teacher, and I said, hey, all my answers are right. I have all my work here. What's going on? The teacher says, I don't know what you did. And he's literally the instructor of the business finance class.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah, so I don't know. All that kind of stuff puts stuff into perspective for me. What I chose to do after college is I went and I started building houses again. I framed houses all winter in Iowa. It was terrible. We get paid on production.
Where were you back? Like, did you stay up Northeast Iowa, or did you come back?
I came back to Des Moines area because I had a person that I'd worked with in the summers down here.
Okay.
And it was easy for me to just jump in again.
Yeah.
I was working as a subcontractor. I liked the team. We were a team. We were out making things happen together. But when it got to be winter time, we got a contract on a huge house being built in Polk City. We built it that winter, but we were scraping ice off the studs before we could sheet them. The compressors wouldn't run in the morning.
Eesh.
The guns were literally frozen, in your hands. The compressors, when they run, there's moisture in the air.
Yeah.
And when it compresses, it pushes that moisture out, ends up in the tank. Well, in the wintertime, all that freezes or it pushes moisture into your lines, then your guns don't work. You have to heat all. It's just a mess. We were working over 40 hours, or I was working over 40 hours a week, making like $200 a week, just to get the project done. During my senior seminar class, I had made a joke that maybe just like all these people, all my peers at the time were so involved with finding people that fit them so they could start their lives together. I thought maybe societies work the same way. Like maybe this isn't a match for me. Maybe I need a different culture, and that will actually pair with me better. And I got thinking about that, and then I was working so hard and not making any money, but doing stuff I like doing. And in that senior seminar class, they'd asked us, in order to finish the class, you had to have a plan what you were going to do after, which they wanted you to have a job. Well, I said my plan, I'm just going to move to Australia. I was joking. I just knew I had to have an answer.
Well, and why did you just pull Australia out of your ass, or was
I
there
just
like?
I just pulled it out of my butt. I don't know. I like Crocodile Dundee, maybe. I don't know.
Of course. Who doesn't?
It's a big knife.
So you said you were moving to Australia in senior seminar.
Well, then I'm framing houses all winter in Iowa. It's freezing cold, and it's summertime in Australia. And so I get reading have you ever read The Fatal Shore?
I haven't.
It is a very intensive 2,000-page book on the history of Australia, which I don't know if you know about the history of Australia.
I do not.
They're all criminals.
Well, I do. Yes, it was a penal colony. Yes, that was where I did know that. And also, did you know where, then you probably know the history of the Australian accent is actually a drunken English accent. Mm-hmm. And so when you start hearing the Australian accent through, if you've ever heard a drunken Englishman, it tracks. Like 1,000% it tracks. But yes.
Well, I read about the whole history of Australia. After I ended up in Australia, I found out I knew more probably about the history of Australia than most of the Australians there. And they do have quite an interesting history if you ever choose to dive into that, or have the time. I know you're busy.
That's right. I read a lot, so that'll fit. I'll add it to the list.
It's kind of dry, but
I have a 1,500 page about the rise and fall of the Third Reich, but I only made it 500 pages through, but also interesting.
Hey, 500 pages is quite a few on
I'll revisit
one of
it
those
some
dry
point.
books.
Yes, but anyways, sorry, continue.
So I'm in Iowa. It's cold. I'm reading The Fatal Shore.
What led you to that in the first place? What made you pick up Fatal Shore? Was it just...
I started talking to people about Australia.
Okay.
I started voicing who's been to Australia, and eventually I found a contact that had actually lived in Australia prior. I asked to have an interview kind of like this with him, and we sat down, talked for a few hours, and he gave me The Fatal Shore and said, if you really want to know before you go, you should read this book. So I did.
Okay.
Australia, I'm 22 years old. I have lived in Iowa my whole life. I had been outside the country prior. My freshman year of college, I had made my own class for May term and went and took German in Germany, which I went and did by myself over there. Was there for about 6 weeks, learned a lot, but it was still different choosing to go to Australia because I wanted to be there for an extended timeline. I filed for my visas. I got all that set up. I tried to figure, I was calling every night, different places in Australia, trying to find somebody that would talk to me about a potential construction job upon arrival. Everybody thought I was nuts. Nobody's just going to give somebody a job halfway across the world for 3 months from now. I was looking, I thought maybe somebody else would want to go. So I asked some friends. Everybody else kind of thought it was just like I needed to be pairing up and starting a life and doing that stuff. However, my brother was in college, Seth, who's 18 months younger than me, finishing up a kinesiology major at Iowa State. He heard what I was thinking about, and he was like, I don't really have any plans afterward. That sounds pretty good to me, too. So he decided to go with me to Australia. And we ended up there in August, I think, of 2015.
Okay.
So we stayed there for a year, worked construction the whole time. We sold almost everything that we owned prior to going. Got there, bought a station wagon that ran on LP gas, like a barbecue. And then me and him lived in that car for pretty much the whole year, jumping between different construction jobs. We got my scuba certification while I was there. I did some municipal contracting that I never done for city sidewalks. We were learning a lot. I got to surf. It was just fun.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and so,
it was probably one of the best years of my life. In reality, looking back on it.
Did it feel like it at the time?
Yeah, I was loving it.
Good.
I loved it. I could have easily just stayed there. And by the end, when we got there, and obviously nobody knew. There was a couple American guys that wanted to work when we arrived. But by the end, we were actually getting enough phone calls that we could have just stayed and started a business in Australia. We were on primarily the East Coast the whole time. Mm-hmm. Most of our time was spent in the Brisbane area, specifically a town called Bangalow, which is by Byron Bay. Of people that have been to Australia would know about Byron Bay. It's a pretty popular spot.
So,
most easterly points where the sun hits first.
Interesting. Did not know that.
Yep.
So did Seth do construction growing? Like, was he like you where he did a lot of construction stuff, or was he just like typical middle child and just kind of do whatever?
He ended up working for a construction company in high school. Mm-hmm. And he was kind of on a cleanup crew. He wasn't really working as a tradesman, but he was employed through this construction business and go change these sprinklers, go clean this basement out, go scoop this driveway, stuff like that. That's kind of how, but he still was a part of the industry. Mm-hmm. And then in college, he ended up working for one of the, Seth paid his way through college. He graduated with no debt because he worked the whole time. He was working 40-hour weeks and paying off his school while he was going to school.
Okay. Good job, Seth. I don't mean to rag on you.
Seth did a really good job with that. But he was working for one of Iowa State's farm labs, kind of out by Boone. And so he was getting to use some machinery there, and he was still doing repairs and kind of working in the industry. Mm-hmm. I'd say I truly think the first time he really got involved was when we went to Australia and started working together. We did paint jobs, retaining walls, built roofs, tore whole roof structures off houses, rebuilt them from scratch, did all the rafter framing, pergolas, deck finishes, a lot of dirt work.
So you guys were pretty broad and diverse in the skills that you were doing in Australia?
At that time, we were really just hungry, and we would take whatever. It was hard. We didn't have a lot of options when we showed up, so we were just taking whatever people would give us an opportunity to do. Mm-hmm. Which sometimes, we ended up doing concrete. I had never done concrete before.
How'd that go?
Good, actually. Yeah, it looked a lot harder, and I was way more nervous than I should have been because it went well.
Okay, so you guys aren't actually like working for an established construction company there necessarily. You're like independently getting jobs.
Mix and match.
Okay.
Yeah, but we're not employed. We're just working as freelance labor.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so then you stayed for a year because I assume you had a year-long visa. Is that why you stayed for the year?
We had a year-long visa. The visa ran out. Money, currency markets had changed. We had showed up with everything that we own, bought some stuff so we could live for the year. It was trading basically dollar for dollar when we showed up. When we left, we were only getting 60 cents for every dollar. So we lost about 40% in a conversion, which was terrible. So we decided instead of going home, let's go spend our money somewhere where the money goes further. And we went to Southeast Asia and stayed there for about 2 months.
Okay. Where at?
Thailand is where we started, and then we made it through Laos and Vietnam, and that's where we spent most of our time. Vietnam was the best, in my opinion. The food in Thailand was absolutely amazing. Top 2 in the world is, for me anyway, so far. I think that India could definitely compete, but I've never been there. Would be Thailand and Mexico. Mm-hmm. My 2 favorite foods.
And so your Southeast Asia, that was not a work trip. That was just a pure enjoyment.
Yes.
Or did you, I'd say you were not working in Southeast Asia.
No work. Money went a really long way in those countries. So.
Yeah.
But that was very, very eye-opening. Here, I had never been. I'd lived in the U.S. I had been to Europe. I had just spent a year in Australia, and this was the first time I entered what some might consider the third world.
I would just say it's non-Western culture.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Probably more
I just think
politically correct.
It's not necessarily more politically correct. I think it's just more of a reality. Yes, it's third world. Yes, it's all the things. But like Western Europe, U.S., Canada, we all essentially have the same values, if you will, culturally pretty similar. I mean, yes, there's some more third spaces, more...
I think there was definitely there's for sure a major cultural shift because all of our culture comes from European culture.
Correct.
Where theirs comes from.
That's what I'm saying.
Something that originated completely different than us.
I would say it's just it's your first foray into non-Western culture. That's what I would call it.
Okay, we'll go with that. There was also, other than the fact that the culture was so much different, the standard of living was so much different.
Yes.
Our eyes were opened up by that. We were very much so challenged, especially the time we spent in Vietnam. Their Agent Orange changes the DNA of the people that it affects. That gets passed down genetically. Anybody that was affected by you can't spend an hour on the street in Vietnam without seeing somebody walk by with some sort of deformity. That's a direct result of the Agent Orange, and it wasn't even them, it was their grandparents that were affected by it.
Yeah.
So this is a generational problem that was created. There's no sort of way to do reparations for that. But the amount of effect that we have in the world, the amount of people that have no idea that that's the daily life for people there, and then the choices that we're making today had profound effect on both me and Seth, and it was very hard to come back to the United States and be okay with sitting in a vineyard in Oregon, having wine, listening to nice music. It just didn't seem right. So we both struggled with that for a really long time after we got back.
Yeah. So you guys, you're gone for, call it 15 months-ish, something like that. And then you come back to the U.S. And you have, again, like you said, you've traveled, your eyes are opened to certain realities, some different possibilities, that kind of thing. Did you guys come back straight to Iowa, or did you?
We actually flew into LA and then went up to Oregon, stayed in Oregon for about a week with my aunt. That's when I'm talking about the vineyard. That just for some reason sticks in my head. It was just too stark a contrast between where we were just a few days before and then the life that was happening here. It just couldn't quite make sense to us at the time. After that, we came back to Des Moines. We had left most of our cash in Australia or had spent it in Southeast Asia, one or the other. But there was still, we had worked almost the entire year there. There was still some money, but there was no point in bringing it back because you'd lose half. So we still have an ANZ bank account.
Nice.
It's I have no idea what's in it right now, but what we had when we arrived home was about $250 a piece. That's where we were when we started Renomads.
Okay, so you come back, $250 a piece, $500 total.
We had sold everything we owned before we left.
Yeah, you literally have nothing.
We had $250.
Yeah, and then you still have student debt following you around at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going, oh shit, at this point? Like, or, what is the thought when you first get back? Had you guys already started talking about, I think we can do this stateside, or?
No, we were still deciding. I mean, I didn't know if I maybe wanted to go back to Australia. I was kind of up in the air, but I knew that I knew I could go anywhere and be okay. Mm-hmm. It didn't matter where it was, just whether or not I was going to try to produce things or not.
Yeah.
We had no money, so first thing we needed some money. We used our money to buy hand tools, like hand saws, hammers, stuff like that. And we got a project through a friend to reinstall a bay window that was broken. It took us, if I had the right tools, we literally could have done it in 4 or 5 hours. I think it took us 6 days to do the project because we did it all from scratch, and we got $700 out of the project plus hand tools when we got done. We bought a miter saw with that and a table saw. We'd continued to do that from August till November, where at that point we had the tools that we needed. I was hustling all the time. I would work and then I'd go. At that point, a lot of the work I was finding was actually in local tap rooms and things like that. I wasn't going in there to drink, but I'd go in there and I'd get a Diet Coke and chat people up for a few hours until I found a job for next week. Mm-hmm. By November, we had tools so we could actually accomplish things. We didn't have a vehicle. We were currently borrowing our parents, and we were both living at our parents' house. But I bumped into somebody at a bar that had a job in Lake of the Ozarks, and there was a 20-plex condo building, and it had been condemned, and they had hired a contractor for the exterior structural and finish renovations, but they hadn't hired anybody for the interior yet. And so it was a Saturday night, and he said, well, I can think about that. And so I call him up on Sunday and I say, hey, I don't know if you were serious about that last night, but if you want, I'd love to look at it. And they said, well, that's great. I'm down here right now. I just drove down. If you want it, look at it. Why don't you come down to Lake of the Ozarks? So I said, okay, I'll be there tomorrow. And I went that afternoon, bought a truck, which we still have. It's $2,000. It was a $2,000 truck that somebody had. It was a family inheritance deal. They just need to get rid of it. They pay 50 cents a mile to drive that $2,000 truck. We put over 75,000 miles on it.
Nice. It's paid for itself a couple times.
Yeah. It actually makes money.
Yeah.
Instead of costing to drive it, actually makes money driving it.
That's awesome.
So for anybody that's driving old vehicles, I commend you guys for doing that because is value in that. Mm-hmm. Anyway, we buy the truck. I load it with tools. We drive to Missouri. We get talking about what's required. We a week later decide. We all agree on $100,000 contract to renovate these condos. At that point, my brother came down. We ended up hiring 2 other guys to help us, and we spent the next 5 months living in these condemned condos while we were renovating them, because that's what we had to do. And after we got out of that project, which was in like April, I think we finished the project 3 days over the timeline that we were given. So we were right in line with where we needed to be. But we had money. We had cash in our account. And then we were able to come back and start actually getting things going for our business.
Yeah.
But money's always been an issue. If you don't have any money, you can't get any money.
Yeah.
And that's just a huge dilemma. You know, you can go through the Small Business Administration, stuff like that, which is a pain to make anything happen. So it's actually easier for us just to go to work and try to generate it ourselves. And
yeah, it's faster, especially, you talk about the SBA, forget the friggin' paperwork, but the timeline of getting things approved. Like, you might start the process today and you might see that money in your account 9 months from now. Maybe.
With a lot of work in the meantime.
Yes. And like you said, at that point, how many jobs could you have gone out and already generated that revenue? And yeah, whatever. Is what it is. They always say with banks that when you need the money, they won't give it to you. But when you don't need the money, they'll have plenty for you.
And that's the truth of the matter.
Yeah.
It's been very difficult for our business to acquire any sort of funding. That's one of the biggest hurdles that I deal with all the time is cash flows. We're at a point now where, we're completely self-funded, but that's been because of years and years of sacrifice and hard work. That's why we're in the position that we are now. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I feel you.
I think you know.
I know.
Yep.
I very well know. But it's a reality of it, unfortunately. Okay, so you guys get that first job, you get some money flowing. Did you and Seth have like a formal agreement? Had you already named the company Renomads? Did you have a company established? Were you two just like dudes
We had been talking about it. Like the year in Australia, we had talked about what it might look like to continue to do what we're doing, but somewhere else. Mm-hmm. I had spent lots and lots of time. Renomads is the name itself is a couple of years worth of thinking that didn't just, it kind of did just pop up out of the blue, but that was after a lot of time thinking about that. What we wanted was, I didn't want a name anybody else had. And the biggest thing for me, one, I wanted to reflect what we actually did, but the biggest thing for me is I wanted to not compete with anybody else on Google when they type my name in. Mm-hmm. Renomads wasn't even a word till we made it. We literally have a trademark on the word.
Nice. Sweet. That's funny.
So, and now I'm seeing like Brazil, there's a Renomads in Brazil now. Now, I don't know if that happened because I went to Brazil and somebody's seen the name, or if they come up with it since, but we're not going to Brazil to compete with their trademark laws or anything like that. It's just what it is. Anyway, if you type Renomads in pretty much anywhere in the world, we're top of the page every time.
Nice. So
that was the other one that I thought of that was... It was an original thought I had, but it was an original thought a lot of other people had, was Homeworks. And there's one in Des Moines. There wasn't when I thought of it. But there was one in California and a couple other spots. I actually thought of Renomads on we were doing a project before we got that big job. We had acquired a job in Ohio to do a small addition in somebody's house somehow. So me and Seth were driving from Iowa to Ohio. I remember going by, I can't remember what it is, but it's a dam outside of Indianapolis. That's where I thought of the name Renomads. And me and Seth were in the same car together, so he gets the same credit. But we were going to do renovations. It's nomadic. Nomads wandered around to find food and water for their animals.
Yeah.
We're wandering around into people's houses doing renovation work. That's where the name comes from.
You were two just rambling Naylor boys, just out there trying to make a buck.
We do have a formal agreement where it's 50-50 split. Earlier when you asked if it's 30% or whatever, but it's me and Seth that started the business. Heath was still in school.
Poor Heath. Kidding. Just kidding, Heath.
He's in better shape than all of us now because he's actually got an electrical license.
I know.
All of us just have degrees that we aren't using for anything. So
right. So, okay. So what's that been like, though, working with brothers?
Everything has its challenges, but we know each other.
Yeah.
We knew what we were getting into when we started. And nobody works like my brothers. I've got a lot of good workers at our business, but nobody has the dedication and the commitment that my brothers do. And so, I couldn't find anybody else better to work with, in my opinion.
Yeah.
There's things that I wish, we could maybe do a little bit differently some days, but I'm sure they'd say that same thing to me.
Well, and you would say that about any employee, you know what I mean? Any employee, anybody you work with, you're never going to 100% get along or agree or have the same vision or anything like that. I was just curious. It's funny as an outsider, like I can see the three of you interact. And so it's funny.
What we have, I feel there is always the, I don't know how best to say this. There's friendship. There's different ways relationships work. You treat your boss different than you would treat your friend. You treat your friend probably different than you treat your family. We're all three of those. So it's very confusing sometimes, but I think it's taken some time, but we found out where we all are most beneficial to the relationships. Going back to team, we are all different, but we're all pulling in the same direction. That's very fulfilling for me in my position because, like I said, we could all be doing different things and it would probably be better for us as individuals. But if you're not fulfilled in what you're doing, then why are you doing it? None of us are married. None of us have children. We don't need a lot of money to support ourselves right now. That might be things that we want someday. So we're hoping as we work as a team, we'll eventually get all that figured out, or if I can eventually get the bank to give me some money so I can do some things a little quicker, then that would help too. But
yes, isn't that the truth? Okay, so you guys get this big job down in the Ozarks, and then are you back to Des Moines then at that point and off and running, or are you still kind of, we'll take whatever we can get wherever we can get it?
That's funny you say it like that. That is very much what our business. A lot of people start businesses with the idea that they're going to specialize in one thing and become really, really good at that one thing and perfect it. I like new stuff. Most of my guys, we don't want a factory job. We want custom work. We want to be creative and make something from scratch and new. Every person that works at our business has that desire. If you want to do the same thing every day, you're probably not going to last very long at Renomads because we're just not going to have that to offer. So to answer your question, we still look at, you can call us about anything. We'll show up and at least look at it and give you our opinion if we can help with that problem. But from my perspective, what it gets down to is basic economics. we sell labor. We are capable. If we can generate enough calls and I can evaluate enough people and they want to work with us, then that gives us the opportunity to find the better jobs in the group. We don't have to take every job, but I at least want the opportunity to look at it and see.
Yeah.
What really, and I feel like this portion of our business is still not fully utilized. But what we would technically specialize in is our ability to be mobile and our ability to not need 12 different trades or companies. We're an in-house crew. We have tile setters, we have concrete masons, we have electricians, we have painters, drywallers. I have an engineering degree. I'm good with structures. We have carpenters on staff. If you're to hire us and send us somewhere, especially at one point we were pursuing national parks projects because I wanted to be the person that got sent out to the ranger station. It's hard to get 12 different companies to go to the ranger station, but if they could just send us, we could do all the different parts, which would give us the ability to compete very nicely against these other companies that are, or if the government had, which there are programs like that where they want you to perform 90% of the work in-house, we're the perfect company for that because we're already established that way. The reasons we might not have been able to get that figured out to date is because money and time.
Yeah.
If we don't have money in the bank to float costs for a while where we can compete for those type of contracts, I'm working on site, and I'm typically the person that does the legwork on the paperwork. All that's possible. That's our future. That's where we're going. But it's taken a long time to build a team that can support somebody like me working in the back office to try to create better opportunities for us. I feel like we've just gotten there in the last year. So I'm excited to see what happens as we move forward, because I would like to take advantage. I don't want to just take every job that comes our way or evaluate every job. I really would like to have us specialize more in that type of field. I'd rather have 12 clients that own houses in multiple places and want to know that they can exactly who they're working with, and then just send us there and we'll give them whatever they want. That would be my preference, but
Yeah.
that's just hard to put all together. Maybe 10 years from now we'll have that or something.
Yeah. And maybe have multiple teams of said all in-house. Hard to say. But then, so did you guys force Heath into getting his electrical?
We held him down. Yep.
So it happens to the baby of the family. You just get forced by the older two to do things against your will.
Well, are you the baby of the family?
I'm only one of two, but yes, I'm the baby. So Heath, I got you.
I think Heath made the choice to do that as the older brother.
Heath, we can talk later. It's fine.
Heath was going to Wartburg College, and actually he played for the Wartburg football team as well as a kicker. He did one semester there. We talked a little bit, my dad and my mom, earlier. There was a job change that happened in Heath's first semester. We also talked about how expensive Wartburg is. There wasn't... my parents were helping supplement some of the costs, and then, we were paying them back for some of that. That was no longer available because their circumstance was unpredictable at that time. So Heath needed to make a different choice for college. That's also the exact same time we were working in Lake of the Ozarks. So we said to Heath, why don't you just come down here and do second semester with us, and then you can figure out what you want to do. And that's what happened. So he actually came down. We hired him. He was a freshman in college, did first semester, dropped out, worked with Renomads for 6 months, then went back to Iowa State, which he did a full year at Iowa State. But he got the opportunity to see what working in the field was like. He also got the opportunity to talk to us, who had been in Australia and done some things, and the environment, as we discussed, coming out for a college graduate, there was so much more opportunity for somebody that was just hungry. And specifically, in our opinion, because of the field we were in, if you had a license, there was doors that would open up. Licenses in Iowa, which this is a whole nother topic of conversation. The construction industry is very Wild Westy. There is very, very little regulation in our industry.
That might be surprising for people. I think that when people show up, you think, oh, of course, they're licensed and registered and have insurance and all the things.
A contractor's license in Iowa, to get a contractor's license, is $25, and you fill out a few lines on the Secretary of State's website, and that's it. Mm-hmm. Then I'm a contractor. Other than that, you have to buy liability insurance. Mm-hmm. At that point, it's just getting business cards, and all of a sudden you're a home remodeler, People don't understand that. Banks don't understand that. I worked in Australia for a year. They license painters in Australia.
Really?
You have to pull a permit to paint a house.
Dang.
Because they want to make sure that not necessarily the product that you're using is or your process. Here's the issue. The paints that we used of the past had chemicals and things in it that we might or might not want in our soils and our water supply. They have processes to remediate that before they put new paint on the house. They want to make sure the new paint goes on in a way that it's going to last, because we don't want to just waste paint. So there's a lot of smart science behind something simple like painting. But if you're in the United States, specifically in Iowa, go buy yourself some paint from Sherwin-Williams and paint whatever you want.
Yeah.
No one's asking those questions. I was young enough when I got started in this, and I went to Australia, and I thought there might, as time goes on, be more regulation, specifically because nobody actually owns their house. Banks own their houses. I would thought the banks might someday step in and say, we need to protect our investment by creating a little bit better regulation than what we currently have. I'm still waiting for that to happen. I want to get grandfathered in. That's what I think. Originally, that's what my thought was. I'm getting, as time goes on, I'm thinking it's probably not going to change. The powers that be like things the way they are. But, for example, we are currently doing a project for somebody that's using a neighborhood finance group out of Des Moines. This is basically a historic neighborhood financial group that if you live in a specific area, you can qualify for funds if you apply, and they see that you complete the project according to historical standards, right? So it's a $3,000 drywall job. It's tiny. It has taken 6 months 9 months maybe for them to get the financing together to approve this. We finally got to the point last week where I got an email from the finance group that said, hey, we went to try to finally process the loan today so you guys can get started. However, we see that there is a lien on the house, which now we can't fund your project, unfortunately. And they contacted us because they said we were the ones that had the lien on the house. Well, we didn't have a lien on the house. We had a commencement of work. We legally are supposed to have a commencement of work on any project we do. I call this guy back and I say, I don't know what you're talking about. We don't have a lien on the house. We are getting funding for a construction project that we're about to start. And whenever you start a construction project as a contractor, you should put a commencement of work on it. He's like, I've been in the business for 5 years. This has never happened to me. And he's literally funding construction projects.
Yeah.
So that's how deregulated our industry is. There is, in my opinion. And most of the guys in the industry aren't paying taxes, aren't purchasing insurance, so they don't want regulation because they wouldn't be able to get the parts and pieces together.
Right.
The people that are hiring those people get cheaper rates because they're hiring people, so they don't want to push for regulation. The only people that are going to end up pushing for regulation, in my opinion, are banks and homeowners, but they're uneducated and don't understand that our current construction industry is lacking what most of the rest of the first world, if I can use first world, the way their industry is set up. Ours is set up much more similar to third world countries, actually.
Where it's, like you said, Wild West, and it's just
Yes.
whoever you can find to do the job and get it done and as cheap as possible and as fast as possible, and just don't look over here sort of a situation, which is, it is what it is. Interesting. Yeah. That's an entirely different, that's a rabbit hole that we could go down for quite some time. I did want to talk to you about your motorcycle endeavors as well, because I think that's a super interesting, your winter activities, shall we say, that have now evolved into, I would call them more winter, like you're actually working during the winter off-site locations in a much more tropical area. But you took a nice little motorcycle ride at one point, and we briefly touched on the Super Bowl in Bolivia. But so talk to me about that. How'd that come about?
So a few years after we started our business, I still had this
Rambling heart.
a restlessness, I guess. Rambling is a nice way to put it too. I'm working in an industry, in a society and culture, providing. In my mind, part of the reason why, we could be building new houses. In my opinion, and I've argued this with people, I'm a recycler, is actually what I'm doing. I'm really trying to do what's right. We could be in the new home industry. I could be doing lots of other things, but it's important to me that we're working to make a better world. So we're in remodeling. We take old stuff and we make it look newer again. There's a lot of stuff I throw away every day that I wish I didn't have to, but that's just, you can't win them all. Anyway, that's something that's always in the back of my mind. And it's a global mindset is very important to me. I don't think we should close ourselves off to the world. I think the world is opening up and getting more interconnected, and why fight that? Why not embrace it and find a way to do what we do better? If we're never getting outside the U.S., how are we ever going to know how to do any of it better? I chose to do this motorcycle trip because of a man named Mike Haley, who had originally done this same trip in, I can't remember if it was the 90s or early 2000s. And at that time, it would have been without cell phones and paper maps and things like that. No Google Translator. But he had told me that story actually years prior when I was in college, and I always just loved the idea of just taking off, heading south, and seeing how far you could go. So we came back from Australia. I was here for a few years. I was getting kind of itchy to maybe go do something else. I was building something, but again, a lot of that wasn't directly benefiting me, so I needed something for me. And I didn't have anyone in my life at that time for any reason to stay, so I thought I need to go and do this. Winters are typically slow, or at the time, especially when we were starting our business, half of our our market. We have interiors we do, and we have exteriors we do. Half that is not available in Iowa in the wintertime unless you want to go out and frame for $200 a week. So
Or fall off a roof.
Or fall off a roof in January, yes.
Different story for a different day.
So I thought this is a unique opportunity. I'm at a unique point in my life. We have just enough money to maybe do something like this. But people don't do this. People might be interested in this. And maybe, I know you're guilty of this as well, trying to make the most out of if you're going to go in a direction, get the most out of it. So I thought this needs to be a fundraiser. And so we partnered actually with Mike Haley, who since his trip, he used to sell franchises. He went on that trip and then he got out of that business altogether and actually started nonprofits. And so he was building schools at orphanages. We're a building company. He went on that trip. It was just like a natural partnership. So we became ambassadors of World Writers Foundation and started a fundraising campaign in Des Moines and Iowa to challenge the people of Iowa, Des Moines, the United States, whoever wanted to get involved, to donate $1. If they donated $1, me and Seth would ride 1 mile south. Well, they donated $15,000. So, we jumped on. These are not Harleys. This looks like a dirt bike. They're Honda XR 650Ls. They're giant dirt bikes. We got 2 of the same bike. That way we could, if we needed to, we could take parts off one, put on the other, and keep going. And we took off in November from Iowa. Everything went pretty good until we got to Guatemala. I've never had problems with people. We don't speak any Spanish. We had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. It was more scary to enter Mexico because of all the feedback we were getting from everybody else. They were like trying to scare us from going. Mexico's great. The food's awesome. People are wonderful there. Mm-hmm. If you go to Chicago and go down the wrong street, it's a problem. If you are looking for trouble anywhere in Des Moines, Iowa, you can find it.
Right.
Just don't go to those places and look for that stuff.
Yeah.
Keep your nose clean. Mm-hmm. In Guatemala, we had there was a engine oil leak, and we lost oil on one of the bikes. It blew the piston on a bike. We got stuck in Guatemala for about a month. We had to ship parts down, replace the cylinder, put a new piston in. We got back on the road. I guess at that point we just rebored the cylinder. We got back on the road, and there was still an issue. The next best country to stop in was Costa Rica, because it's the nicest country in Central America for anyone that's ever been through there. Best quality of life, things like that. It's expensive. We made it to Costa Rica. We knew we were going to have to stop there again for potentially a month and wait for parts, but they did sell the same motorcycle in Costa Rica, so we were keeping our fingers crossed that we could find a decent mechanic. We end up, we kind of put a Facebook ad out there. This woman named Erin Argue reached out and was like, sure, I'll house a couple guys for a month. We didn't know anything about her. And we just rolled into her place, and she accepted us, fed us, kept us around. We did some construction work for her house, built a fire pit for her and things like that, kind of to trade off for her helping us. And that relationship that was established there then turned into more down the road. But after that, it was a working relationship. But after she made a donation of the campaign, her boss actually made a $2,000 donation to the campaign.
So add 2,000 miles there.
Add 2,000 miles there. And then we took off again, and there's a road that goes all the way to the tip of Argentina, except for a 60-mile stretch between Panama and Colombia called the Darien Gap. There are foot trails through there, but there is no way to drive a motorcycle through there. There was some guys actually trying to do it at the same time as us, and most of their bikes got airlifted out of there. I don't think there was one running bike at the end of going through the Darien Gap. We ended up finding an Austrian sailboat captain, and we ended up strapping our bikes to the side of his boat, and he actually unloaded us. Technically, he yanked us around a little bit. He technically brought us to Colombia, but there was no roads to this town. It was just like an island town. We lowered our motorcycles using the mast of his boat into canoes in the bay, and then paddled our motorcycles to shore, which we sat there for about 2 weeks and waited. I would swim out to boats and ask them to bring us. Again, I don't speak Spanish. We ended up in South America, Colombia, went through Ecuador, Peru, basically got to Bolivia, and we had that same bike that was having issues had another failure. At that point, we had drove the miles we were supposed to drive. We wanted to make it all the way to the southern tip, Tierra del Fuego in Argentina. Ushuaia is the town. But we were out of cash. We had a broken bicycle or motorcycle. We had fulfilled our end of the deal, which was to drive the miles. And so the closest town we were in was Cusco. Me and Seth actually had to ride. I found somebody that would ship the bike from Cusco to Lima. And then me and Seth rode one small, it's not a small dirt bike, but it is for two people, plus all their baggage that they've been living out of for the last 5 months.
You looked like a little circus act.
Oh, we definitely did. There wasn't enough room for us to put our feet on the foot pegs. I put my feet on if you were driving, you put your feet on the highway pegs. The guy sitting behind you would work the shifter and the brake, and the guy driving would steer and work the clutch and front brake. So it was a mess. We had to drive 750 miles like that.
Of course you did.
Brother bonding time.
Yeah, it's a lot of, yes. Mm-hmm. Oh, God.
Those instances, the unknowns that you're going through, there's a lot of stress involved with that stuff. There's a lot of things that happen on that trip that challenged us in ways that will never, ever get challenged here.
Yeah.
Life becomes a little bit easier in some ways. It also becomes, depends on the person, a little dry. I do like the stress and the challenges. So some days I still miss the problems of trips like that. But from that trip, I've been back 2 more times, moved the motorcycles twice. Basically, once was from Peru, and you can only store things like that in a country for so long before they get upset about it and they seize it. So I'm on timelines. Currently, Brazil is lax on their rules, so I'm able to kind of sneak the motorcycles into Brazil, just across the border and leave them there indefinitely, and then I can just sneak them back to Bolivia.
Interesting.
And process paperwork that way and get up-to-date stuff. That's the only country in South America for anyone that's interested. If they're traveling South America on a motorcycle and you're going to leave something for longer than about 12 months, Brazil's the only place. It's not technically allowed, but they're never going to find out, at least right now. And that's because their system's not unified. They don't have a central system to check everything.
And Brazil's known for its corruption levels, shall we say.
Brazil is an awesome country, though.
yeah, I've heard.
Yeah.
I've heard, but yes.
So I have been back twice doing some driving around. The biggest thing that came out of that experience, though, one, we got to help some people through the funds we raised. Two, I don't speak Spanish now, but I can communicate with anyone in Spanish. It's not right, but
you can get your point across.
I'm very communicational.
There you go.
Not fluent, but communicational.
Yeah.
Biggest takeaways from that trip, in my opinion, was meeting Aaron Argue, who a year, 2 years later kept reaching out, knew we had a construction business. We built that fire pit for her. She kept calling, and eventually she bought a house that needed fixed, and she wanted to work with us on that. We worked out details. I ended up getting in a plane with 2 other guys. We flew down, and we worked for 3 months. Oh, that was 4 years ago now or something, 3 years ago. She continued to, once I got down there, I actually started working with a group of locals, Nicaraguans, and I was just doing construction management for her with this group, but their cost of labor was much cheaper than ours. So it was a nice balance, both of our systems paired together. I would kind of set work up for this other group when we were gone. They would continue working year round, and I'd check in with them, but we would come back in the summers where the majority of our work was, and use that as supplemental work in the winter times because we were a growing company and we couldn't keep everybody busy. Typically you would lay somebody off. We didn't do that though. We went to Costa Rica with a few guys, and that way everything was spread out. We did that for 3 years. We're currently finished with that project. I don't know if there'll ever be more. I have no idea. I don't know if we could go and do that now at this point because we've got a pretty good foothold here now. But through those experiences, again, going back to some of our original conversation, I like team. I see a global economy that's active right now. I think we as Americans should be very, and I want to see us be involved and aware of our day-to-day actions and how that actually, the implications of that across different markets in the world. Buying an avocado here actually affects people other places. How do I do my part then? Well, the biggest, for me, the easiest way for me to make real change happen was to actually spend time with those other cultures. I was able to do that by getting out of the country and doing it myself, but that was only half of it. Then became a challenge for me to figure out how to bring those people here and give them opportunities that they wouldn't have where they're from. I started applying for visas in 2018 for a guy named Christian Flores, along with Jorge and a few others. I spent quite a bit of money and a lot of time working through the governmental systems, trying to acquire H-2B visas, things like that. I was finding out that there was like 4% of the companies that were applying for the H-2B visas were getting all the H-2B visas. And the people that were getting the visas were getting hundreds of visas. There was 26,000 visas available in 2019. Most of the companies that got those had over 100 visas. I wanted 2. I got overlooked. I don't have the pull to acquire that type of visa. I kept waiting. I kept applying for things. Last year, there was a different program that came available for Nicaraguan refugees, Haitians, Venezuelans. You get a little defeated after doing all that for so long and not getting anywhere and seeing everything stacked against you. But I went ahead and applied again in December or in November after years of work. Christian actually ended up here, and now he's up working for Renomads, which is, I'm not to gloat or anything, but I'm very proud that I was able to do that because that was so important for me to feel like I'm living the life that I talk about, representing myself the way that I wish everybody could. I want to be an example for that. And if I'm not, then how could I ever say a word about it to anybody? So that's where I'm at with things right now. That kind of, I think, ties all that together.
Yeah. You should be proud of that.
Thanks.
It's one of those things
Yeah.
that there's a lot of people that wouldn't see it through. So you should be proud of that.
He'll be here for 2 years. There's potential that I can get him asylum status, which would be indefinite. He'd never be able to vote or anything like that. But we're actually starting on the asylum application process. Started earlier this week. I've been trying to acquire a work authorization document for him. I applied for that 10 days after he arrived. That gives him the ability to pay taxes and legally work in the United States. Technically, he can work right now with refugee status, but there's no way to document any of that kind of stuff, which me running a business, I can't legally pay him outright because of it.
Right. And so he's from Nicaragua?
Nicaragua.
That's what I thought.
But the frustrating part is like UCIS, United States Immigration Services, is one of the most difficult agencies I've ever worked with. Why are people crossing the border? Why are people? Because it's easier. It's so much easier to take that route than it is to do anything the way that you're supposed to do it. It would happen quicker. It would happen cheaper. Just as much opportunity to stay for the most part. Here I am trying to apply for a tax document. I applied on December 6th. I have still not heard anything back about it. Mm-hmm. They sent me something that said, oh, you missed a meeting after. I mean, they never even assigned a meeting. I've called UCIS 2 days ago, and I let them know that. They said, okay. So I called them a month ago, and they said, okay, we've assigned this to a immigration officer. You'll hear from them in the next 30 days. I waited 30 days. I called back. They said, okay, we're sorry. We see that nobody called, but we'll assign it to an immigration officer. You'll hear from us in the next 30 days. That's how the process looks and where I'm at. That's how it's been the whole time.
Yeah.
But it's frustrating.
Of course it is.
How can we complain about people crossing the border when they're hungry and we have no system available for anybody to do it legally?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I can see where that would get really frustrating.
And that's my competition.
It is.
And that's who I compete against.
Right.
We talked about the lack of regulation in the industry.
People not doing it the right way.
It's you can hire people that aren't paying any taxes, aren't purchasing insurance.
And they're going to be cheaper.
And they are going to be much cheaper. But you're not, in doing so, you're not supporting the proper modes. You're only enforcing the fact that people should
continue
do things the easier way.
Continue to do things incorrectly. But you'll get what you pay for. That's one of those things. You can get one of those fly-by-nighters, but the quality of work is not going to be what it should be.
It might or might not be.
It's a crapshoot.
It's a crapshoot. But if you have an opinion on immigration and then you choose to hire another way, then in my opinion, that's hypocritical. It's not. You're working in the exact opposite direction than what you're saying, which, as I said, that's important to me, that I'm heading in the direction that I stand behind. Yeah, you're walking the walk rather than just talking about it, sort of a situation. That's good. Cool. So then what are you really excited for in the next 12 months? Could be business, could be maybe you got another crazy trip planned. Can I go to the bathroom? We'll wrap it up. That's okay. Fine. Yeah. So what, next 12 months, do you have a project that you're looking forward to, or? I'm really using, like I said, I've transitioned my role in the business. I'm spending much more office time. have a list of things that would take me years to accomplish if I only had the time. So that's really what I'm looking forward to. You made a really good suggestion earlier today about sending thank you notes to clients after I get done. Those are all things that I'm aware of that I would like to be doing, but just never had the time, the money, and the ability to step in and start making those things happen. When you're just working on putting food on the table, it's hard to do those extra things, even though they're very important and would make things easier. It's an efficiency issue,
right?
But when you're buried, you can't. It's really hard to make things more efficient.
Oh, without a doubt, and it's difficult to step back and realize that. Yeah, don't worry. My husband can tell you that I'm a pain in the ass with the amount of suggestions that I have and the things that I would like to have done. But it's just figuring out how to put those systems in place and get everybody rowing in the right direction, like you said, making sure that direction is the one you want to be going in. But awesome. Okay. So if anybody is interested in following along with you guys, wants to maybe have you out to come look at a project, where should they go?
Renomads.com.
Okay.
Easiest way to get us on there. We also have a Facebook page. But Renomads.com would be the best way to get us on their site. There's a Schedule Now tab at the top. You click on that and it pulls up all the times that are currently available and links direct with my calendar. So that's the easiest way.
Awesome. Is there anything else you want to leave people with?
Just thanks for having me on your show today.
No problem. Thanks for sitting down and taking the time.